Okay, so welcome to Module 2 for SPED 738. In this module, we're going to take a look at Universal Design for Learning, the concepts of inclusion in our classrooms today, and diversity in schools. In this first video, I want to just touch base with you on Universal Design for Learning, really point out some key points that I want you to make sure that you really focus on as you've read the text and look at some classroom application. So really what we want to look at is how does the Universal Design for Learning principles impact your classroom? How does it impact learning that's occurring in your classroom, whether it's in a pull-out situation or in the general ed curriculum? Now you read about Universal Design for Learning in Chapter 2 and read about those three networks. And I really like this graphic because it helps me remember those three networks and kind of how they impact learning differently. When we look at the recognition network, even looking at what region of the brain that occurs in, we're really looking at the what of learning. So what are students seeing? What are they hearing? What are they reading? That whole process of information and how we're presenting it to students in the classroom. Lots of options that we have in that area to provide students the best way that they learn by providing those multiple means of representation, which is principle number 1 of Universal Design for Learning. The second principle is that addressing that strategic network, so really that how of learning. Okay, so how are students organizing their ideas? How are they expressing their ideas? How can they do that in different ways? Okay, maybe individualizing that for each student. So maybe this student is better at doing a presentation. This student's better at writing a paper. So how do we meet their individual needs in terms of the how of learning? So really providing those multiple means of action and expression. The other thing that we look at, especially when we're talking about individualizing, is how can we make accommodations for expression, especially when we're looking at working with students with special needs. In this module this week, we have an AT connection, making a connection to assistive technology. And the tool that you will look at this week really addresses that multiple means of action and expression. It's a tool that we can use to accommodate for students who need assistance, maybe with grammar and spelling. So that fits perfectly within this strategic network. It's the how of learning. We address that issue that the student maybe has, that deficit with grammar and spelling, by using that particular assistive technology tool. And in doing so, we're implementing Universal Design for Learning in the classroom by providing that student with an alternative means for expression. So if they're producing some written work for the teacher, the goal of that written work is really to evaluate the student's knowledge about a particular topic. It's not to evaluate necessarily their grammar and spelling. Then we can implement that assistive technology tool to provide them some support. Third principle of UDL is really addressing the effective network, the why of learning. So how do we keep students, how do we keep them motivated? How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them interested, excited about what they're doing, right? This is where we're really stimulating that interest in their learning. So providing them multiple means of engagement, a variety of ways that they're coming in contact with the learning that we want to occur, okay? How do we have a goal we're addressing in the classroom. We want them to master this content, providing multiple ways that they're engaging in that content. So when we look at implementing UDL in the curriculum, there's kind of a method for how we do that. And I really like how the authors laid this out. And I'll talk a little bit about personal experience. I have to say that one of my passions when it comes to working with students with disabilities is Universal Design for Learning, because I really feel like it increases their access to the general ed curriculum. And our role as special educators can really be an expert in UDL, really being able to help those general ed teachers look at their curriculum, identify ways that we can plug in those principles to give our students with disabilities more access to the general ed curriculum. So to give you an example of kind of how I do this, okay? One of the things I like to do is make connections with local schools here in the area where I'm at. So I'm in the Kansas City area. And this fall I'm working with an elementary school that's really interested in Universal Design for Learning. So What I do is on a weekly basis, I go in with grade level teams. They have a 2-week plan period. Their principal really values having that team plan time. So for example, second grade will sit down for 2 hours on a Thursday and they have combined plan time. Now I know that's not feasible in every building, but you can still do this even if you don't have that joint plan time. There are ways to do this. But what we do is we first start with a goal. Okay, so we've got our goal. We know what we need second graders to do in this area of literacy. And that's what drives everything else we do during that plan time. So then we start taking a look at methods. How are we going to teach that? Okay, what variety of methods are we going to use? When we look at universal design for learning in that principle 3, multiple means of engagement, how are we going to use our methods to provide students a variety of ways of kind of interacting with the content of that goal? Then we look at materials. So what kinds of things can we plug in and use that are going to meet students, a variety of student learner needs, but also maybe come in and use as an accommodation to help our students with disabilities. Maybe not do pull-out during that time, but be in that general ed classroom and maybe using some materials that would accommodate them so they are still working towards that same goal as their non-disabled peers. And then we look at assessment. So how are we going to assess students? It's not going to be the same for every single student. We know that certain students assess better in this manner, and so we're going to assess them this way. We've got another block of students that assess better this way, so let's look at some assessment tools or processes that we can use. And so as a team, we sit down and we go through this whole process, really looking at unit plans is how we do it, and some unit goals, and put all of these pieces in place so that we know that through the methods, the materials, and the assessment, we are addressing that goal, and we're doing it by using the UDL principles, okay? So that we have options within all 3 of those things, the methods, the materials, and the assessments, to meet a variety of students' needs. And if we start out our unit from the get-go planning that way, we're more likely to have better inclusion in the classroom. And so this is something that I'm pretty passionate about because I'm out doing it in the schools. And I will share some experiences throughout the semester as we kind of go through this process and share some of the tools that we're using. Now, I do want to point out there's some great resources at the National Center on Universal Design for Learning. And if you go to their website, let me pull that up here. Sorry, you get a picture of my kids there. Let's see if I can load this here. Okay. So they have a great resource. National Center on Universal Design for Learning has lots of basics on what UDL is, research if you're interested in that. One of the things that I honestly go back to on a frequent basis is this UDL Guidelines, version 2.0, examples and resources. The reason that I like this is it makes connections to each principle in real specific ways. So if I want to look at Principle 1, providing multiple means of representation, and I've got a student I'm working on, working within the classroom, we're working on activating background knowledge, and I'm not sure of how I do that in a variety of ways. What are some other ways I can do that besides what we're already doing in the classroom? Well, I can go down here to multiple means of representation. I can go to guideline number 3, checkpoint 3.1. You'll notice it says activate or supply background knowledge. If I go to that, it kind of gives me some key considerations to be thinking about, which always helps me have in my mind. So I need to be thinking, how does this help the learner meet the goal? Okay, and how does this take into account the variability of all learners? And then as I scroll down, it's got some great examples that I can go to. It gives me information about that resource. It tells me why does it meet UDL. Also gives me some other areas of UDL that it addresses. So one of the resources on here that I love is Windows to the Universe. If you teach science, this is a really cool resource. And this is a perfect example of something designed with UDL principles in mind. So let's go to that real quick and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here. Okay. Several things that this has kind of playing into UDL principles. It has content in English and Spanish, so it addresses that multiple means of representation. If we have a student that's an English language learner, we can provide the content in Spanish, because while we're teaching science, we're not necessarily focused on primary goal is not necessarily focused on teaching that English portion of it. Okay. The other thing that you can do as you go to content, for example, if I want to read about Earth here, find one, okay, the Earth's magnetic field. You'll notice up here I have beginner, intermediate, and advanced. If I go to beginner, it reduces the amount of content and the complexity of the vocabulary in the content. So this is really nice way to meet students' reading ability, to meet their prior knowledge by being able to accommodate. They're all using the same resource and website, but they can go to the level that they need. If they go to advanced, provides a little bit more information for them that maybe they're ready for. Excellent example of UDL principles, okay? And so that's why I like this resource, because, you know, we can't know every tool and every option out there that we could use. We've got to have places we can go that can quickly connect us to quality resources when we're talking about plugging in those UDL principles, especially when it comes to technology. And so this is just really good because you know if it's on here, it's kind of been vetted by experts who understand UDL. It's been vetted by educators. And I would just encourage you to use this resource for your classroom. Back to our presentation here. So that wraps up really kind of the UDL principles. You're going to read a lot about it in the text. You're going to take a look at an example of it when you look at that assistive technology connection, and then we will discuss it further in the discussion forum.